Shadows and light. A German shepherd's journey. The sound pierced the stillness of the shelter. Not a growl of aggression or the desperate bark of confinement, but something far more haunting. A cry so raw with fear that it made even the most hardened volunteers stop in their tracks. It was the sound of a soul shattered, a spirit broken by hands that should have offered protection, but had instead delivered only pain. The German shepherd trembled violently in the corner of Kennel 23, pressed against the wall as if trying to disappear into it. His once magnificent coat hung in dull, matted patches, and though his physical frame spoke of natural strength and power, his eyes told a different story. Vacant pools of amber that flickered with terror whenever someone approached. What could transform a majestic creature into the shadow of himself? And what would it take to bring him back from the edge of such profound darkness? No one knew. Until the day Ellie Morgan walked through the door with nothing more than patience in her pocket and compassion in her heart. The world was about to witness what happens when love meets fear and refuses to back down. The West Ridge Animal Shelter sat on the outskirts of town, a low-slung brick building surrounded by fields that turned golden in the afternoon sun. Inside, the usual morning chorus of barks and whines created a symphony of hope and desperation that shelter workers had learned to interpret like a language. But Kennel 23 remained eerily quiet most days. Noah Chen, the shelter manager, paused outside that particular kennel, clipboard in hand. His weathered face creased with concern as he observed its occupant. According to the intake form, the German shepherd's name was Shadow, a fitting designation for a dog who seemed to exist only in the periphery, always trying to fade from sight. Still not eating much, Noah noted, jotting down observations. 4 months old, approximately 70 pounds, no microchip. Found tied to a fence post at the abandoned Willow Creek property. Shadow lay curled in the farthest corner, his body forming a tight C-shape, ears flat against his skull. His ribs protruded slightly beneath his coat, evidence of neglect before his rescue. But it wasn't his physical condition that worried Noah most. It was the crying. Every attempt to handle Shadow, to check his wounds, to lead him outside, to offer comfort, was met with the same heart-wrenching response. The moment a hand came near, Shadow would emit a high-pitched cry that sounded almost human in its anguish. Not aggressive, not dangerous, just utterly, profoundly terrified. "Hey there," Noah said softly, keeping his distance from the kennel bars. "Going to have someone special visit you today." Shadow's eyes flicked toward the voice, then away, no recognition or interest registering in his gaze. Outside the shelter's main entrance, Ellie Morgan sat in her faded blue pickup truck, gathering her thoughts. At 34, she'd been a veterinary nurse for nearly a decade, volunteering at West Ridge twice weekly for the past 3 years. Today was supposed to be her day off from both the clinic and volunteering, but Noah's call had changed that. "We've got a German shepherd. Worst case of emotional trauma I've seen in years. Won't let anyone touch him. The board's already talking about options if he doesn't improve." Bad options, Ellie. She'd seen dogs like this before. Animals so damaged by human cruelty that they'd lost the capacity to trust. Sometimes they could be reached. Sometimes they couldn't. The difference often came down to time, patience, and finding the right approach. The early October air carried a slight chill as Ellie stepped out of her truck. She wore simple clothes, well-worn jeans, a soft flannel shirt, and a light jacket, nothing that would rustle loudly or seem threatening. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she carried only a small bag containing a few items she might need. Noah met her at the entrance, his expression grim. "Thanks for coming in." "The German shepherd, Shadow," Ellie corrected gently. "Right, Shadow. He's exactly as I described on the phone. Physically, he's recovering from malnutrition and some infected sores from the restraints. Mentally, Noah shook his head. I've never seen a dog so haunted. What's his history? Scant. Highway patrol found him tied to a fence post behind that old abandoned property on Willow Creek Road. No food, no water. Been there at least days, maybe longer based on his condition. No ID, no chip. Nobody's called looking for him. Deliberate abandonment, then. That's my guess. But there's more to it. The way he reacts to human touch. Noah's voice tightened. Someone did more than just abandon him. Ellie nodded, her jaw setting with determination. Let me see him. They walked through the shelter's main corridor, passing kennels filled with dogs of all sizes and circumstances. Some barked and jumped excitedly at the sight of people. Others watched with hopeful eyes. A few remained indifferent, already accustomed to disappointment. At Kennel 23, Noah stopped. I'll let you take it from here. Less stimulation is probably better. Ellie nodded, watching Noah retreat down the hallway before turning her attention to the kennel. Inside, she could make out Shadow's form, still pressed against the back wall. Rather than approach the bars immediately, she did something unusual. She sat down on the floor across from the kennel, cross-legged, her back against the opposite wall, and she waited. She didn't look directly at Shadow. She didn't speak. She simply existed in the same space, breathing slowly, occasionally glancing around, as if the hallway itself held her interest, rather than the traumatized dog. Inside the kennel, Shadow remained motionless, except for the slight rise and fall of his rib cage, and the occasional twitch of his ears. His eyes, however, shifted, first to the floor, then to Ellie's shoes, then briefly, very briefly, to her face before returning to his fixed staring point on the concrete floor. Ellie stayed for an hour that first day. She never entered the kennel, never tried to engage directly. She simply sat across from him, a calm presence in a world that had given Shadow every reason to believe humans meant only pain. When she finally stood to leave, she did so slowly, murmuring in a low, gentle voice, "See you tomorrow, Shadow." His ears twitched at the sound, but he made no other movement. In the office, Noah looked up from his computer. The board wants progress reports. They're not keen on keeping animals that can't be rehabilitated and adopted. How much time do I have? Officially? 2 weeks before they reassess. Unofficially, Noah sighed. Show me something positive in 10 days, and I'll fight for more time. Ellie nodded, already planning her next visit. I'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same clothes, same everything. Why the same clothes? Same everything. Because right now, familiarity is the only safety he knows. On her third visit, Ellie brought a small Bluetooth speaker and placed it near the kennel. She didn't play anything jarring or loud, just the gentle sound of quiet classical piano, barely audible. Shadow's ears moved constantly, tracking the unfamiliar sounds, but the music seemed to relax the rigid set of his shoulders, ever so slight. On the 5th day, she brought something new, a small container of boiled chicken breast, shredded into tiny pieces. She didn't try to feed him directly. Instead, she placed several pieces just inside the kennel door, then resumed her spot against the opposite wall. Shadow didn't approach the food while Ellie was present, but when she returned the next day, the chicken was gone. He ate, she told Noah, unable to contain the small smile that crept across her face. That's something, Noah agreed cautiously. But he still cries if anyone tries to examine him. The vet tech had to use a pole leash yesterday to move him for cleaning, and it was... He trailed off. It wasn't good. Ellie's expression hardened slightly. No more pole leashes? I don't care if it takes longer to clean the kennel. He needs consistency right now, not more trauma. Noah raised his hands defensively. Not my call. Medical team makes those decisions. Then I want to be here for his next exam and his next kennel cleaning. Ellie, you can't be here 24/7. Try me. On day 7, Ellie did something bold. After placing the now customary chicken pieces slightly farther inside the kennel than before, she opened the door fully and sat in the threshold. One leg stretched across the opening, the other bent at the knee. Shadow watched her from his corner, his body tense, but not trembling as severely as during her first visits. His eyes, once vacant, now held a question, curiosity, fighting against instinctive fear. "It's just us," Ellie said softly, keeping her gaze averted, her posture relaxed. No rush, no pressure. "We have all day." They didn't, of course. Ellie had a shift at the veterinary clinic in 3 hours, but Shadow didn't need to know that. For 20 minutes, neither moved. The only sounds were the distant barks of other dogs and the quiet piano music from Ellie's speaker. Then, almost imperceptibly, Shadow shifted, not forward toward Ellie, but sideways along the wall, repositioning himself so that he could watch the open door without being directly in line with it. Progress. By day 9, Shadow would eat the chicken while Ellie sat in the threshold, though he still maintained a careful distance. He no longer flattened himself against the wall in terror, though his body remained alert, ready to retreat at the slightest provocation. On day 10, the deadline Noah had mentioned, Ellie arrived with determination etched into every line of her face. Today would not involve a dramatic breakthrough. She knew better than to force such things, but she needed something. Some sign that Shadow was capable of more than just tolerating human proximity. She sat in her usual spot in the threshold, placed the chicken pieces in their usual spot, and waited. Shadow approached after only a few minutes, his movements still cautious, but more fluid than before. He ate the pieces one by one, his eyes darting between the food and Ellie. Then Ellie did something she hadn't tried before. She held the final piece of chicken in her open palm, extended just slightly from her knee. Shadow froze, his eyes fixed on the chicken, then shifted to Ellie's face, then back to the chicken. The internal struggle was visible. Hunger and the beginning of trust battling against deeply ingrained fear. Ellie didn't move, didn't encourage, didn't cope. She simply held her hand steady, allowing Shadow to make his own choice. A minute passed, then another. In the distance, a door slammed, and Shadow startled, retreating several steps. Ellie remained still, her hand unwavering. Slowly, Shadow approached again. He stretched his neck forward, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air between them. Then, in a movement so quick, it was almost imperceptible, he darted forward, took the chicken from her palm, and retreated to his corner. No contact, no touch, but he had approached willingly, had taken food directly from her hand without crying out in fear. When Ellie reported this to Noah later, his expression softened with the first real hope she'd seen regarding Shadow. "It's small," he admitted, "but it's significant. I'll tell the board he's showing progress. He needs more time," Ellie pressed. "I know. I'll do what I can." What neither of them knew was that the small victory with the chicken was about to be overshadowed by something unexpected. A claim that would threaten everything they'd worked for and force Ellie to make a decision that would change her life forever. 3 days later, the shelter's front desk phone rang at 2:43 p.m. Mira, the receptionist, answered with her usual cheerful greeting. Her expression darkened as she listened to the caller, and she quickly transferred the call to Noah's office. Ellie was sitting on the floor of Kennel 23, now fully inside the space with Shadow. He remained in his corner, but the distance between them had decreased significantly. She was reading aloud from a paperback novel, not because Shadow understood the words, but because it helped him grow accustomed to her voice. When Noah appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Outside!" Something in his tone made Ellie's stomach tighten. She closed the book slowly, murmuring a soft goodbye to Shadow before following Noah into the corridor. "What's happened?" Noah ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "We got a call. Someone claiming to be Shadow's owner." The words hit Ellie like a physical blow. "That's impossible. He was abandoned. Maybe, maybe not." The caller knew details, age, markings, even the area where Shadow was found. "Says the dog got loose during a move and they've been searching for months." Did they explain the condition he was in? The trauma? The obvious signs of abuse? Noah's expression hardened. "They claim he was already skinny and nervous before he ran off. Said he had behavioral issues they were working on." "That's convenient," Ellie scoffed, anger rising in her throat. "Did you get a name?" "Victor Reeves says he's coming by tomorrow with documentation to claim him." Ellie glanced back at Kennel 23, where Shadow was watching them through the bars, ears forward, listening to their voices. "He's lying. You've seen how Shadow reacts to handling. That's not just from being lost for a few months. That's systematic abuse." "I believe you," Noah said quietly. "But legally, if he has proof of ownership and no documented history of animal abuse charges, then what?" "Then the shelter might have to release Shadow to him." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Ellie's mind raced through options, scenarios, possibilities. When is afternoon? I need to be here." Noah nodded. "I figured you'd say that. But Ellie, prepare yourself. If his documentation checks out." She cut him off with a shake of her head. "It won't come to that. I won't let it." That night, Ellie barely slept. She lived alone in a small A-frame cabin on the edge of town, surrounded by 3 acres of wooded land. Peaceful, private, perfect for someone who valued quiet and solitude. As she sat on her porch swing, watching the moonlight filter through the pine trees, she made a decision. If Shadow's supposed owner showed up with credible documentation, she would file an emergency foster application. She'd take Shadow home with her, away from the shelter, away from whoever had hurt him so badly. It wouldn't be a permanent solution, but it would buy them time. The next morning, she arrived at the shelter earlier than usual, a folder of paperwork clutched in her hand. Noah was already in his office, looking tired and worried. "I want to foster him," Ellie said without preamble, placing the forms on Noah's desk. "Whether this Victor person shows up or not." Noah sighed. "I figured you might." He glanced at the forms. "The board would need to approve this, and if Victor proves ownership, it would be a complicated legal situation." "I'll handle complicated. I just need you to process the application." Noah studied her face for a long moment. "You're really invested in this dog, aren't you?" "He deserves a chance," Ellie said simply. "Someone who hurt him once shouldn't get the opportunity to hurt him again." Before Noah could respond, the front door chimes sounded, and they both turned to see a man enter the lobby. He was tall and lean, with close-cropped hair and a weathered face that might once have been handsome before years of hard living left their mark. He wore jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt under a leather jacket. Nothing about him seemed immediately threatening or unkind, which made him all the more dangerous in Ellie's estimation. Noah stood. "That's him. Let me handle this initially." Ellie nodded, staying in the office but positioning herself so she could observe through the glass partition. Noah approached the man, hand extended professionally. "Mr. Reeves? I'm Noah Chen, the shelter manager. We spoke on the phone." The man shook Noah's hand briefly. "Call me Victor. I'm here about my dog." His voice carried clearly, confident, slightly abrasive, with an undertone of impatience. Ellie watched as he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew several folded papers. "Got everything right here. Vet records from last year, photos, purchase receipt from the breeder. His name's Ranger, not whatever you've been calling him." Noah accepted the documents, reviewing them carefully. These seemed to be in order. However, I should inform you that the dog was found in concerning physical condition, and he displays severe behavioral trauma consistent with abuse." Victor's expression darkened momentarily before smoothing into a look of concern. "Like I told you on the phone, he was already having issues before he got lost. Nervous disposition. We were working with a trainer." "The dog doesn't just display nervousness, Mr. Reeves. He shows terror of human handling. He cries out when touched." Victor shrugged. "Some breeds are sensitive. German shepherds need a firm hand." The casual dismissal sent a chill down Ellie's spine. She stepped out of the office, no longer able to remain silent. "A firm hand isn't the same as cruelty," she said, approaching the men. "I'm Ellie Morgan, veterinary nurse. I've been working with the dog you're claiming." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed her. "Then you know shepherds can be dramatic. Bet he eats fine, sleeps fine, just doesn't like being handled. That's a training issue, not abuse." "Would you like to see him?" Ellie asked, keeping her voice level despite the anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. Victor nodded. Shadow was already on alert, sensing the presence of strangers. When they came into view, his reaction was immediate and devastating. At the sight of Victor, Shadow didn't just retreat to his corner. He pressed himself against the wall with such force it seemed he was trying to push through the concrete. His body trembled violently, and the whining began immediately. A high, desperate sound that escalated in pitch. "See," Victor said, gesturing toward the kennel. "Same behavior. Told you he had issues." Ellie watched Shadow carefully, noting the difference in his reaction. With her, even in the beginning, Shadow had shown fear, but not this level of terror. His eyes now were not just afraid. They were locked on Victor with a specific recognition that confirmed everything she'd suspected. "This isn't general fear," she said quietly. "This is a reaction to you, specifically." Victor's jaw tightened. "You calling me a liar?" Noah stepped between them. "No one's making accusations. But you have to admit his reaction is extreme. Don't care what it looks like. Those papers prove he's mine. I want him back today." Noah maintained his professional demeanor. "Unfortunately, that's not possible. Even with your documentation, we have policies regarding animals showing signs of trauma. There will need to be an investigation and a board review." "How long?" "At least a week. In the meantime, a week." Victor interrupted, voice rising. "That's ridiculous. It is my property." "He's a living creature," Ellie countered, no longer bothering to hide her disgust. "And he's terrified of you." Victor turned to her, eyes cold. "You work here? I volunteer here. I am a veterinary nurse by profession. Then you should know better than to interfere with someone's legal property." Noah intervened again. "Mr. Reeves, I understand your frustration, but our policies are clear. We'll need to review your claim along with the dog's condition and behavior. I can have the board expedite the process, but it will still take several days." Victor stared at Noah for a long moment, then glanced at Shadow, who was still trembling against the wall, before finally returning his attention to Ellie. Something in his expression made her instinctively step back, a flash of calculation that felt more threatening than his anger. "Fine," he said finally. "Do your review, but I'll be back, and I'll bring whatever else I need to take what's mine." He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the corridor. Ellie released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Inside the kennel, Shadow's whining had subsided to occasional whimpers, but his body remained rigid with fear. Noah turned to Ellie. "I've never seen a reaction that severe. Because that man abused him," Ellie said flatly. "There's no question now. The documentation looks legitimate," Noah admitted reluctantly. "And without evidence of a crime. His body is the evidence," Ellie insisted. "The psychological trauma is the evidence." Noah sighed heavily. I'll submit everything to the board, including notes on his reaction today. But Ellie, prepare yourself. The legal system doesn't always recognize emotional trauma in animals the way it should. Ellie looked back at Shadow, who was watching them with desperate attention, as if sensing his fate hung in the balance of their conversation. "Process my foster application," she said firmly. "Today." Noah hesitated, then nodded. "I'll mark it urgent." The next morning, Ellie arrived at the shelter with a new determination. She'd spent the night researching animal protection laws, calling colleagues for advice, and preparing her home for the possibility of bringing Shadow there. She'd cleared a quiet space in her living room, purchased a specially designed orthopedic bed, and rearranged furniture to create easy escape routes and hiding spots. Anything to help a traumatized dog feel secure. When she reached Kennel 23, Shadow was already watching the door, as if he'd been waiting for her. For the first time, he moved toward her when she entered, not all the way to the front of the kennel, but a definite, deliberate approach. Ellie sat in her usual spot inside the kennel. "Today's different," she told him softly. "Today we're going to try something new." Wow. From her bag, she removed a pair of soft cloth gloves, not the rubber ones used for medical procedures, but simple cotton gardening gloves that carried her scent, but changed the texture of her hands. Shadow watched her put them on, his head tilted slightly in curiosity. "I need to know something," Ellie continued, keeping her voice low and soothing. "I need to know if it's all human touch you fear, or if it's specific hands, specific memories." She placed a piece of chicken on the floor halfway between them, then slowly, deliberately, extended her gloved hand, palm up, and rested it on the concrete. Shadow stared at the hand. His eyes darted from the glove to her face and back again. He took one hesitant step forward, then another. He stretched his neck toward the chicken, nostrils flaring as he inhaled its scent. Then, in a movement that brought tears to Ellie's eyes, Shadow bypassed the chicken entirely, and instead lowered his nose to her gloved fingertips. He sniffed carefully, thoroughly, his ears forward with interest rather than flattened in fear. When Ellie gently, so gently, turned her hand to let her fingers brush against his muzzle, Shadow froze, but didn't retreat. He didn't cry out. He allowed the contact for 1 second, 2, 3, before stepping back. Ellie remained still, her heart pounding with the significance of what had just happened. Shadow hadn't just tolerated being touched. He had initiated the investigation of her hand, had chosen contact on his terms. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Such a brave, good boy." Shadow watched her, his amber eyes holding something new. A flash of connection, a moment of trust so fragile it might shatter with a breath. For the next hour, they continued this careful dance of approach and retreat. Shadow would come forward, investigate Ellie's gloved hand, sometimes allowing the briefest touch before stepping away to process the experience. By the time Ellie needed to leave, he was taking chicken directly from her palm, his teeth gently removing the food without contacting her skin. In the office, Ellie could barely contain her excitement as she reported to Noah. "He let me touch him," she said, the words tumbling out. "He initiated contact. Noah, this is huge." Noah smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his professional reserve. "That's amazing, Ellie. Truly, truly." He hesitated, then added, "The board reviewed your foster application. It's been conditionally approved." Conditionally. They want documentation of continued progress, and they're concerned about Victor's claim. One member suggested we wait until that's resolved. "We can't wait," Ellie insisted. "You saw his reaction. If Victor forces the issue—" "I know," Noah interrupted gently. That's why I pushed back. I told them a neutral environment might be beneficial while the ownership dispute is settled. Relief flooded through Ellie. So I can take him. Not immediately. There's paperwork, a home check, and he'll need a final veterinary exam. But yes, if all goes well, you could potentially take him by the end of the week. The timeline felt both excruciatingly long and impossibly short. End of the week meant 3 more days of Shadow in the kennel. 3 more days of vulnerability if Victor returned. But it also meant only 3 days until she could bring Shadow to the safety of her home. "Thank you," she said, meaning it deeply. Noah nodded. "Just be careful, Ellie. The way Victor looked at you yesterday. I don't think he's the type to give up easily." "Neither am I," Ellie replied. What neither of them realized was how quickly Victor would escalate the situation, and how their carefully laid plans would soon be tested in ways they couldn't anticipate. 2 days later, Ellie arrived at the shelter for Shadow's final veterinary examination before foster placement. The home check had been completed the previous evening, with the shelter's adoption coordinator approving Ellie's cabin as a suitable environment for a traumatized dog. Shadow had continued to make progress, now readily accepting Ellie's gloved touch, and even allowing brief contact with her bare hand on his shoulder or back. The crying had stopped entirely during their sessions, though he still showed wariness around other staff members. As Ellie parked her truck, she noticed an unfamiliar car in the lot, a dusty black sedan with tinted windows. Something about it triggered a sense of unease, but she dismissed the feeling as nervousness about Shadow's upcoming exam. Inside, the shelter seemed unusually quiet. Noah wasn't at his desk, and Mira's usual spot at reception was occupied by a young volunteer Ellie didn't recognize. "I'm here for Shadow's pre-foster exam," Ellie explained. "Is Dr. Rivera ready?" The volunteer checked the computer. "I don't see that on the schedule. It should be there. Noah arranged it yesterday. Let me check with someone." As the volunteer disappeared into the back office, Ellie's sense of unease grew. She glanced around the lobby, noting the absence of the usual morning bustle. The volunteer returned with a middle-aged woman Ellie recognized as one of the board members, Diana Matthews, a local attorney who handled much of the shelter's legal work. "Miss Morgan," Diana greeted her, expression serious. "We need to talk. What's happened?" Ellie asked immediately, her mind jumping to Shadow. "Is Shadow okay?" "The dog is fine," Diana assured her. "But there's been a development. Victor Reeves returned this morning with additional documentation and a lawyer." Ellie's stomach dropped. "What kind of documentation?" "A signed affidavit from the breeder confirming his purchase, registration papers, and most significantly, a court order granting him temporary custody while ownership is fully determined." "That's impossible," Ellie protested. "It's only been 2 days since he was here. No court moves that fast." Diana sighed. "Normally, no. But his lawyer argued that the shelter was wrongfully withholding private property. And they found a sympathetic judge. Where's Noah?" "In a meeting with them now." Ellie felt the blood drain from her face. "They're here? Now?" As if in answer to her question, the door to the conference room opened, and 3 men emerged. Noah, looking grim. A sharp-dressed man in a suit who could only be the lawyer. And Victor, a triumphant smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Ellie stepped forward, positioning herself directly in Victor's path. "You can't take him." The lawyer intervened smoothly. "Miss Morgan, I presume? I understand your concern, but my client has provided extensive documentation proving ownership, corroborated by the breeder who originally sold the dog. Did your documentation explain why the dog cries in terror when your client approaches?" Ellie challenged. "Or why he was found abandoned, malnourished, and traumatized." Victor's expression darkened. "Like I told them, he got loose during our move. Must have been on his own for weeks. Not my fault. What happened to him after that? Miss Morgan, the lawyer continued, the court has issued a temporary custody order while the full case is reviewed. The shelter is legally obligated to comply. Ellie looked to Noah, desperate for support. His expression was apologetic but resigned. Our hands are tied, Ellie. The order is clear. Then I want to see him before he goes, Ellie insisted. If nothing else, I deserve that. The lawyer glanced at Victor, who shrugged indifferently. Fine. Make it quick. Noah led them back to Kennel 23. Shadow was alert, standing rather than cowering, having heard familiar footsteps. When he saw Ellie, his tail gave a slight wag, the first she'd ever witnessed from him. Then he saw Victor, and the transformation was immediate. The tail tucked, the body lowered, the trembling began. See? Ellie pointed out, her voice breaking. That's not normal. That's not just fear of strangers. Dogs recognize people who discipline them, Victor said dismissively. Doesn't mean abuse. Ellie knelt by the kennel door, speaking softly to Shadow. It's okay, boy. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. And they all knew it. Noah produced a leash. Not the harsh control pole, but a regular nylon leash. Mr. Reeves, if you'd like to collect your dog. I'll do it, Ellie interrupted. Let me put the leash on him. After a moment's hesitation, Noah handed her the leash. Ellie entered the kennel slowly, murmuring reassurances to Shadow, who pressed against her legs, seeking protection from the man watching from the doorway. With gentle movements, Ellie slipped the leash over Shadow's head, her fingers lingering on his fur. She leaned close, whispering words meant only for him. This isn't the end, I promise. As she led Shadow from the kennel, Victor stepped forward to take the leash. Shadow immediately balked, pulling back with such force that Ellie nearly lost her grip. He doesn't want to go with you, she stated flat. Doesn't matter what he wants, Victor replied, reaching for the leash again. He's mine. In that moment, something shifted in Ellie's expression, a flash of determination that made Noah step forward cautiously. Ellie, she ignored him, focusing entirely on Victor. If you take him today, I'll file a report with animal control. I'll document every mark on his body, every behavioral sign of abuse. I'll petition the court for a full investigation. Victor's lips curled. Good luck with that. Dog's been in a shelter for weeks. Anything could have happened here. I'm not finished, Ellie continued, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. I'll follow up every single day. I'll drive by your property. I'll report any sign of mistreatment. If he so much as loses weight or develops a new fear, I'll be there with documentation and witnesses. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. Miss Morgan, that could constitute harassment. Then he can file charges, Ellie replied, not taking her eyes off Victor. But in the meantime, everything I do will be creating a paper trail. And if anything happens to Shadow under your care, that paper trail will lead directly to you. A tense silence followed. Victor stared at Ellie, calculation clear in his eyes as he weighed her threat. Finally, he turned to his lawyer. How much is the shelter's adoption fee? The lawyer blinked in surprise. I don't see how that's just find out. After a brief consultation with Noah, the lawyer returned. Standard adoption fee is $250 for a purebred dog, plus vaccination and neutering costs. Victor reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He counted out $300 bills and held them out to Noah. Consider him sold, he said flatly. Not worth the hassle. Noah didn't take the money. What are you saying? I'm saying keep the damn dog. But I want a receipt showing I sold him to you free and clear. No more legal claims, no more court dates. The lawyer looked bewildered. Mr. Reeves, after all the effort to establish ownership, changed my mind, Victor interrupted. He glanced at Shadow, then at Ellie, his expression unreadable. Some fights aren't worth winning. An hour later, after hasty paperwork and a notably quick departure by Victor and his lawyer, Ellie sat in Noah's office, still processing what had happened. "I don't understand," she said. "Why would he just give up like that?" Noah leaned back in his chair. "My guess. Your threat worked. Some people like control, but they don't like scrutiny. You promised him a level of attention he didn't want. Or maybe he realized Shadow would never be easy to handle with his history," Ellie suggested. "Either way," Noah said, sliding a folder across the desk. "These are for you. Foster paperwork, already approved. Unless you've changed your mind." Ellie opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. "Changed my mind? After all this?" Noah smiled. "That's what I thought. Shadow can go home with you today if you're ready." "I've been ready since I first saw him," Ellie replied. That afternoon, Ellie led Shadow from the shelter for the first time. He balked initially at the main doors, overwhelmed by the flood of new sensory information. The fresh air, the open space, the absence of concrete walls and metal bars. She didn't rush him. She knelt beside him on the sidewalk, giving him time to process each new experience. When a car drove past, he pressed against her legs, seeking reassurance. When a leaf blew across their path, he startled but didn't panic. "The world's a big place," she told him softly, "but we'll figure it out together." At her truck, she opened the back door where she'd prepared a comfortable space with blankets and secure restraints. Shadow hesitated, looking from the vehicle to Ellie and back again. "It's okay," she assured him. "This is a good journey." After several minutes of gentle encouragement, Shadow finally jumped into the truck. Ellie secured him safely, then climbed into the driver's seat, glancing back to check on him. "Ready to go home?" Shadow's ears perked forward at the word home, as if somehow understanding its significance. The drive to Ellie's cabin took 20 minutes, winding through increasingly rural roads, until they turned onto a gravel driveway flanked by tall pines. The A-frame cabin came into view, its large windows reflecting the afternoon sunlight, its wooden deck wrapping around 3 sides. As Ellie helped Shadow from the truck, he stepped onto the gravel with tentative paws, nose working frantically to process the new environment. The scent of pine needles, earth, and distant water filled the air. Birds called from nearby trees. A gentle breeze rustled through the forest. No concrete, no metal, no echoing barks or clanging doors. Shadow looked up at Ellie, his amber eyes reflecting confusion, uncertainty, and something else. A cautious hope that this moment might be different from all that had come before. "Welcome home," she said simply, and led him toward the cabin door. The first night was challenging. Shadow explored the cabin with trepidation, flinching at unfamiliar sounds and eyeing new objects with suspicion. He refused to lie on the orthopedic bed Ellie had purchased, instead finding a space beneath her dining table where he could watch the entire room while remaining partially hidden. Ellie didn't force interaction. She moved about her evening routine normally, occasionally talking to Shadow in the same gentle voice she'd used at the shelter, letting him adjust at his own pace. When bedtime came, she left her bedroom door open in case he wanted to enter, but he remained under the table, watchful and alert. Around 3 a.m., Ellie woke to the sound of movement. Through the darkness, she made out Shadow's silhouette in the doorway of her bedroom. He stood there, uncertain, as if asking permission. "It's okay," she murmured sleepily. "You can come in." Shadow approached the bed slowly, his claws clicking softly on the wooden floor. He circled twice, then settled on the rug beside her bed, not touching, not close enough for contact, but present, choosing to be in her space rather than alone. Ellie smiled into the darkness. "Good night, Shadow." In the weeks that followed, progress came in small but significant moments. The first time Shadow approached Ellie without prompting. The first time he accepted her touch without the gloves. The first time his tail wagged with genuine happiness rather than nervous appeasement. There were setbacks, too. Dropped pans in the kitchen sent him scrambling for cover. Male visitors caused visible tension. But each day brought more confidence, more trust, more moments of connection. 6 weeks after bringing Shadow home, Ellie sat on her porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and purples. Shadow lay beside her, his head resting on her lap, eyes half closed in contentment, as her fingers gently stroked his ears. His coat had regained its luster, thick and healthy. He'd gained weight, his frame now strong and properly proportioned. The physical wounds had healed completely. The emotional ones took longer, but healing they were. The dog who once cried at human touch now sought it out, leaning into Ellie's hands with trust that sometimes brought tears to her eyes. "You know," she said softly, "I think you need a new name." Shadow's ears twitched, and he lifted his head to look at her. "Shadow was what they called you at the shelter, but it was never really yours, and it doesn't fit you anymore." The German shepherd watched her, head tilted in that expression of curious intelligence that had become so familiar. "How about Phoenix?" Ellie suggested. "Rising from the ashes, starting anew. What do you think?" As if understanding the significance of the moment, the dog sat up and pressed his forehead gently against Ellie's chest, a gesture of affection he'd only recently begun to show. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. "Phoenix it is, then." In the distance, a car engine sounded as it turned onto the gravel driveway. Phoenix's head lifted, ears alert but not fearful. Moments later, Noah's familiar sedan appeared between the trees. Ellie smiled. "Look who's here for dinner." Noah stepped from the car carrying a brown paper bag that smelled of takeout food. His face broke into a grin when he saw Phoenix on the porch, not hiding, not trembling, but watching his approach with calm interest. "Well, look at this transformation," Noah called as he walked toward them, hardly recognizable as the same dog. Phoenix's tail gave a cautious wag, still reserved around others, but no longer paralyzed by fear. "We've been working on meeting new people," Ellie explained. "He's doing better every day." Noah climbed the porch steps slowly, respectful of Phoenix's space. He extended a hand, palm down, fingers curled, the non-threatening posture Ellie had taught him. Phoenix sniffed cautiously, then allowed a brief touch to his head before moving back to Ellie's side. "Amazing," Noah said softly. "Absolutely amazing." Over dinner, they talked about Phoenix's progress, the shelter's newest residents, and plans for the future. Noah had brought news. The board had officially transferred Phoenix's ownership to Ellie. The paperwork finalized that morning. "He's officially yours," Noah said, handing her the envelope containing the documents. "No more temporary status, no more updates required." Ellie ran her fingers over the envelope. "Thank you for everything, for giving him a chance when others wouldn't." Noah shook his head. "Don't thank me. You're the one who saw what he could become when everyone else saw only damage." Later that evening, after Noah had left and the forest had grown dark around the cabin, Ellie sat on the living room floor with Phoenix beside her. The official adoption certificate lay on the coffee table, the name Phoenix written in her own handwriting where Shadow had once been. "It's just us now," she told him, running her hand along his back. "No more looking over our shoulders. No more uncertainty." Phoenix sighed contentedly. His body relaxed against hers, completely at ease with human touch that had once caused him such terror. Outside, an owl called from the darkness. Inside, a woman and her dog sat in the warm light of a home they'd built together, not with lumber and nails, but with patience, trust, and the unwavering belief that broken things could be made whole again. Every day reveals new dimensions of healing. Phoenix, once fearful of every human movement, now rushes to greet Ellie when she returns home from work, prancing in circles with a joy that seems impossible given his history. The transformation goes beyond physical. It lives in the light in his eyes, the easy way he navigates the world, the trust he extends not just to Ellie, but gradually to others. 6 months after leaving the shelter, Phoenix accompanies Ellie back to West Ridge, not as a resident, but as a visitor. As they walk through the doors, several staff members stop to stare in amazement. The trembling, crying German Shepherd has become a confident, calm companion who walks with head high and tail gently wagging. "Is that really Shadow?" Mira asks from behind the reception desk. "Phoenix now," Ellie corrects with a smile. "We decided on a fresh start. They've come to volunteer, Ellie to help with medical checks, and Phoenix, unexpectedly, to provide something uniquely valuable." Noah had noticed how Phoenix seemed to calm other traumatized dogs, how his gentle presence offered a model of what was possible. With careful introduction and close supervision, Phoenix begins visiting selected dogs who struggle with fear and trust. The first is a small terrier mix who cowers at the back of her kennel, refusing food and contact. Phoenix sits quietly outside the kennel, showing neither aggression nor fear. After several visits, the terrier begins to watch him with curiosity rather than terror. Eventually, she approaches the front of the kennel when they arrive. Progress slow but undeniable. At home, Phoenix sleeps on Ellie's bed now, no longer needing the security of the floor or hidden spaces. He enjoys hikes through the surrounding forest, car rides with the window cracked to catch passing scents, and evenings on the porch swing, simple pleasures once unimaginable. One autumn afternoon, as golden light filters through changing leaves, Noah visits with unexpected news. "Victor Rees was arrested yesterday," he tells Ellie as they sit on her porch, Phoenix lounging at their feet. "Animal cruelty and neglect. They found 3 dogs at his property, all in terrible condition." Ellie's hand instinctively moves to Phoenix's head. "Will they be okay?" "They're at the emergency vet now. It's too soon to tell." Noah hesitates. "The police asked if you'd be willing to make a statement about Phoenix. Add it to their case. Add it to their case." Ellie looks down at Phoenix, who gazes back with complete trust in his amber eyes. "Of course, whatever helps." In the statement she eventually provides, Ellie doesn't focus on anger or retribution. Instead, she details Phoenix's journey, the crying that stopped, the trust that grew, the capacity for joy that emerged from the shadows of trauma. She explains how healing happens not all at once, but in moments strung together by patience and consistency, how the past never fully disappears, but can be overshadowed by a present filled with different experiences, different hands, different intentions. The case moves forward, its outcomes less important to Ellie than the daily evidence of Phoenix's resilience. The legal system may or may not deliver justice, but Phoenix has already found something more valuable: peace, safety, belonging. What Phoenix's story teaches us extends far beyond the realm of animal rescue. It speaks to universal truths about trauma and healing, about the remarkable capacity for recovery when given the right environment and support. First, it reminds us that healing requires patience. Quick fixes and rush solutions rarely address deep wounds, whether in animals or humans. Ellie didn't expect Shadow to overcome his trauma in days or weeks. She recognized that trust builds slowly, especially when it has been profoundly betrayed. This patience, this willingness to move at another being's pace rather than imposing our own timeline, is a rare and precious gift in our fast-paced world. Second, Phoenix's journey illustrates the power of consistency. What traumatized creatures need most is predictability. knowing that kindness today will still be kindness tomorrow. Ellie created safety not through grand gestures but through reliable presence, through showing up day after day with the same gentle approach. In a world of uncertainty, consistency becomes an anchor. Third, the transformation from shadow to phoenix demonstrates that identity is not fixed by past experiences. We are not permanently defined by our worst moments or by what others have done to us. The German shepherd who cowered and cried didn't remain the abused dog forever. He became Phoenix, a new being with new possibilities. This truth applies to human recovery as well. We can shed labels that limit us and embrace identities that reflect not what we've endured, but what we've overcome. Perhaps most importantly, Phoenix's story challenges us to see beyond surface behaviors to the underlying needs. What looked like aggression or stubbornness was actually fear and self-protection. By addressing the root causes rather than just the symptoms, Ellie enabled true healing. How often do we misinterpret others' actions, responding to the behavior while missing the pain or fear behind it? The relationship between Phoenix and Ellie also teaches us about the reciprocal nature of healing. While Ellie certainly saved Phoenix, he transformed her life as well. Through helping him, she discovered reservoirs of strength, patience, and advocacy she might never have known otherwise. This is often the case in relationships of care. The one who helps is also helped. The one who heals is also healed. For those who have experienced trauma, Phoenix offers hope. His story suggests that while the past cannot be erased, it can be integrated into a larger narrative that includes joy, trust, and connection. The dog who once cried at human touch now seeks it out for comfort. What once triggered fear can, with time and new associations, become a source of solace. For those who love and care for traumatized beings, whether animals or humans, Phoenix's journey offers validation. The small victories matter. The day Shadow first took food from Ellie's hand. The night he chose to sleep in her room rather than alone. The moment he allowed touch without the buffer of gloves. These seemingly minor milestones were actually profound achievements, each representing a choice to trust despite every reason not to. Phoenix reminds us, too, of the ethical imperative to protect the vulnerable. When Noah and Ellie fought to keep Shadow from returning to his abuser, they were standing up for a principle larger than one dog's welfare. They were affirming that suffering matters, that the powerless deserve champions, that cycles of abuse can and should be broken. Finally, Phoenix's transformation from Shadow invites us to consider our own potential for renewal. Many of us carry shadows from our past, experiences that have shaped us in painful ways, memories that still trigger fear or shame. Phoenix's journey suggests that while these shadows may never completely disappear, they can be balanced and eventually outweighed by new experiences, new connections, new ways of being in the world. The day Phoenix first wagged his tail with genuine joy was not the end of his healing. It was simply a milestone on a continuing journey. Similarly, our own healing is rarely a destination we reach once and for all. It is a path we walk daily, sometimes stumbling, sometimes sprinting, but always with the possibility of moving forward into greater wholeness. In a world often fixated on dramatic transformations and overnight success stories, Phoenix offers a more authentic narrative, one where progress comes through consistent small actions, where healing happens in ordinary moments, and where love proves more powerful than past wounds, not because it erases them, but because it creates space for something new to grow alongside them. As I share Phoenix's story with you today, I'm reminded of the countless other animals waiting in shelters for their own chance at transformation. Some, like Phoenix, carry visible and invisible scars from their past. Others simply need someone to see their potential and offer them a home. Have you ever witnessed an animal's remarkable journey from fear to trust? Perhaps you adopted a rescue pet yourself and watched their personality unfold as they felt safe enough to show their true spirit. Or maybe you've been touched by the unwavering loyalty and forgiveness that animals so often demonstrate, even after experiencing the worst of human treatment. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Tell us about your own Phoenix, the dog, cat, or other companion who changed your life while you were busy changing theirs. These shared experiences remind us that we're part of a larger community of people who believe in second chances and the healing power of compassion. If Phoenix's journey has moved you, consider supporting your local animal shelter. Volunteer your time, donate supplies, or if you're able, open your home to a pet in need. Not everyone can foster or adopt, but everyone can contribute something to this vital work. And if you're currently on your own journey with a traumatized pet, take heart from Phoenix's story. Progress may be slow and setbacks will happen, but with patience and consistency, remarkable transformations are possible. Trust the process, celebrate the small victories, and remember that healing happens at its own pace. Thank you for taking the time to hear Phoenix's story today. If it touched your heart or offered you hope, please consider subscribing to this channel for more stories that celebrate the profound bond between humans and animals. Together, we can create a world where more stories like Phoenix's are possible, where fear gives way to trust, and shadows are transformed by light. Until next time, remember, every animal deserves a chance to rise from their past and become who they were always meant to be.